We got a live question from Madison, and I think it's in relation to kind of talking to the youth leader, youth pastors that I'll even be meeting with later today. What if you have youth group kids, children that their parents don't want to take up the role of being a spiritual leader? Maybe their parents aren't Christians, and you are a youth leader, and you're trying to have that sticky faith conversation with those kids. What kind of a word of advice do you have for them?
I can start. Yeah, yeah, really good, and a hard question, and we all have interact with parents like that, right? And I think one thing for youth workers to remember is that even that parent who seems like they're disengaged from what you're doing, and maybe even in some ways seems disengaged from their child, for us to start by assuming the best of them, and assuming that number one, and I think it's Reggie Joyner who shared this with us on a cohort webinar with some of our churches, but assume that they love their kid.
They do.
Assume that they want the best for them.
Yep.
And assume that they do care about their spiritual growth, even if they feel disengaged, and that there are probably some other reasons, some of them you may not even be aware of. And so I think if we can start by, even when we get frustrated, to start by assuming the best and to recognize all that's on their plate, and to recognize, yes, maybe some of their priorities are misaligned from what we feel like they should be. Maybe they're not willing to pick up that mantle. The other thing is to think about, just to realize that parents often feel like they're blowing it in so many areas, and the last thing they need from us is to put another heavy burden on their shoulders to say, by the way, you're also blowing it spiritually with your kid. And if we can think about ways to more gently come alongside and encourage them, whether that's just sharing resources with them, whether that's resources maybe that can drop hints about how they can how important they are in the lives of their kids. I think often it's pairing them with other parents, and maybe it's parents who are farther along than they are spiritually that could help nurture them and help connect with them. But those are first few thoughts.
Yeah.
Those are great thoughts. I would say also the churches that we're tracking with that are especially effective with parents are really sensitive to the parents' felt needs. Our church, for instance, is having me next month do a talk to parents on how to navigate time pressures. Because, when we ask youth leaders what's the number one felt need of parents, they say busyness. And so I love that our student ministry team has said, let's offer training for parents and how to think about how they use their time and what to say yes to and what to say no to. So that's an example of being really sensitive to parents' felt needs. We were speaking on Sticky Faith in one city, and the church actually offered a spa night for, I can't remember if it was just moms or parents. And I thought, talk about really knowing parents' felt needs and maybe engaging people who wouldn't normally otherwise come to church. So I thought that was a very creative way to, again, just like we do with kids, try to understand kids in their terms. We need to do the same with parents.
Yeah. Did you teach or did you go to the spa night, Kara?
Luckily, I didn't have to choose. So.
We've got a couple awesome questions, and I'm trying to streamline a couple of them that kind of speak to the same area. So while I kind of form that in my mind, I do have one here from Scott. Dealing with single parents. How does a single parent have a sticky faith perspective?
Yeah, great question. I'm a daughter of divorce, raised for a long time by a single mom before she got remarried to a wonderful man. So I certainly understand those dynamics, and we looked into that in these interviews that we did with 50 families. Here's what I would say to parents who are divorced is the principles are largely the same, but the way that they need to be manifested, it's kind of in bold, big, italic letters. So for instance, the power of intergenerational relationships. That's true for every family, every kid. But if you're a single mom or single dad, or for youth leaders who are interacting with single moms and single dads, it's all the more important that that there's other adults who can kind of step in and help fill a bit of that vacuum. So I would say intergenerational and that team of 5 adults, all the more important with single parents.
Awesome. Getting back to the youth workers, I think there's several youth workers that are online right now watching this because the stream of questions that's kind of coming in. One of them, Tony, asks, what does it look like to have healthy family times as a youth worker who's carrying the burden for many families, and how could you prioritize that as a overworked, whether it's a volunteer or a youth pastor, but carrying that burden, how do you prioritize that for your own family?
Yeah.
Well, I'm perfect at this, so why don't I go ahead and start?
We're so good at it. We have a really good answer.
Yeah, Tony, man, that's one of, speaking of felt needs, I mean, that's probably my number one felt needs, is balancing ministry inside the home to ministry outside of the home. And actually, I'm going to be doing a general session at National Youth Workers Convention in both cities, Sacramento and Atlanta, on this very question. And for me, I mean, I'll give you a sneak peek of what I'm going to be saying, is I think it boils down to understanding every time we say yes, we're saying no to something. So every time that we say yes to a ministry commitment or to our family, we're saying no to something else. And to have a group of people around us who can help us make sure we're saying yes to the right things and no to the good but not great things. Yeah. I'm just all the more aware, especially as my kids get older, time is short, and if I say yes to too many other things, my kids get the leftovers. I'm the only mom those kids can have, and so, or will have, and so only I can do certain things with my own kids. And so for me, it's being prayerful and mindful about using the time God's given us and making our yeses to the best things and make sure that we're saying plenty of no's too.
Yeah, and that kind of goes along with Josh asked the question. He started an 11th and 12th grade ministry on Sunday nights. 6th through 10th graders, they meet on Sunday mornings, but he's getting some pressure from the 11th and 12th grade parents saying that's interrupting with their sticky faith time. So again, going back to youth leader and parent interactions, what word of advice do you have for Josh there?
Yeah. The listening to parents piece is so important. It's a good example of sometimes we have really great ideas that as we implement them, we discover we're doing things we didn't intend to do.
Yep.
And it may or may not mean that he needs to change his program,
right,
but it does mean take those parents seriously and sit down and figure out, is there a good way to move forward on this?
Yeah, maybe once a month parents come, so that it's parents and kids together, or maybe he shifts to only meeting every other week. I mean, every Sunday night, that's awesome, but that's a pretty big commitment for anybody to make. So talking with parents ahead of time would probably help with some of that, but if there is a way, even if you're going to continue that weekly format, how can it be family friendly? Are there discussion questions that parents and 11th and 12th graders can talk over before or after? That the time with 11th and 12th graders on their own becomes family strengthening, not family eroding.